Welcome to the era of survival. The visuals in this video were created using artificial intelligence. Our goal was to capture the atmosphere, not to replicate every building or street with perfect accuracy. If you spot historical inconsistencies, we ask you to focus on the story, not the architecture. This is about what it took to stay alive. Close your eyes and picture this. You wake up in 14th century England. There's no alarm clock, no coffee, and definitely no shower waiting for you. In fact, if someone suggested you take a hot bath right now, people around you would genuinely believe you were trying to kill yourself. That's not a joke. In medieval Europe, washing your body with hot water was considered one of the most dangerous things you could do. And the craziest part, the doctors told them so. So here's how your morning actually starts. You're standing on a stone floor covered in old rushes, basically dried grass that hasn't been swapped out in weeks, maybe months. There's a wooden basin nearby with some cold water in it. You grab a rough piece of linen, dunk it in, and wipe your face, maybe your hands if you're feeling ambitious. That's it. That's your entire hygiene routine for the day. No soap, no towel, just the damp rag across your cheeks and you're good to go. Welcome to the 1300s. Why would anyone live like this on purpose? Because the smartest medical minds of the age, the physicians, the monks who studied ancient texts, they all agreed on one terrifying idea. Hot water forces your pores wide open. And once those pores are open, the miasma gets in. Miasma was their word for poisoned air, the invisible killer they believed caused the Black Death and every other plague. So, in their minds, a layer of old sweat and grime on your skin wasn't disgusting, it was armor. The dirtier you were, the safer you felt. If you happened to be wealthy, you had a secret weapon, your linen undershirt. The medical theory said white linen worked like a sponge, pulling toxins out through your skin. So a rich man wouldn't wash. He'd change his shirt 3-4 times a day. Showing off that clean white edge became a status symbol. Your way of telling the world, I can afford to be clean without ever touching water. Meanwhile, his skin hadn't seen soap in months. And then there's the teeth situation. Forget your electric toothbrush. Forget toothpaste. What you've got is a strip of rough linen and a paste made from crushed salt, ground up animal bones, and whatever herbs were available. You'd scrub your teeth with this gritty mixture, basically sandpapering your enamel and hoping for the best. If a tooth started rotting, and they almost always did, nobody blamed bacteria. They blamed the toothworm, a tiny creature gnawing at the root. The cure? A barber with iron pliers, no painkillers, and absolutely zero gentleness. He'd walk out with a gap in your smile and consider yourself lucky. Now multiply all of this by an entire population. You know that moment on a packed subway in August when you catch a whiff of someone who skipped their morning shower? Now imagine an entire city of those people, and none of them have showered in their entire lives. The air is thick with rosewater, musk, and crushed spices, perfumes slathered on to cover what an unwashed city actually smells like. But if all this sounds uncomfortable, we haven't gotten to the real nightmare yet. Because personal hygiene was one thing. What happened to the waste? That was a whole different level of horror. Think about your bathroom at home for a second. Porcelain toilet, a flush handle, clean water that carries everything away in 3 seconds. You never think about where it goes. Now, erase all of that. If you were a nobleman, the luckiest person in medieval England, you had something called a garderobe, a narrow stone room jutting from the castle wall with a wooden bench and a hole cut into it. Below the hole, nothing but air and a 60-foot drop into a growing pile. No pipes, no plumbing, no flush. Gravity is your only friend. And that was the luxury version. In summer, the stench makes your eyes water from 3 floors up. But that smell was useful. Noblemen hung their finest velvet robes inside the garderobe. The ammonia fumes killed the fleas and moths eating through the fabric. Your toilet was literally your dry cleaner. Step outside the castle into London. Imagine sharing one wooden latrine with your entire street. No door, no seat, just a plank over a pit. And if your street didn't have one, your option was a bucket dumped into the open gutter running down the middle of the road, the same gutter you're walking through. Today we have sewer systems, miles of underground pipes, water treatment plants. Medieval London had none of that. What it had was gong farmers. Men you've never heard of, the ones history barely remembers, yet without them, cities would have literally choked on their own waste. Bound by law to work only at night, they climbed into cesspits, pitch-black holes filled with years of accumulated waste, and shoveled it out by hand, waist deep, sometimes chest deep. And those fumes weren't just unpleasant, they were lethal. Gong farmers died on the job regularly, suffocated in the very filth they were hired to remove. Today, your garbage gets picked up on a schedule. In medieval London, the real street cleaners were pigs. Free-roaming pigs eating rotting food people hurled out of windows. But pigs produce their own waste. Mix that with the mud, the sewage, and the runoff from tanners working leather in open vats of urine. Travellers described the smell of medieval London as a physical blow. You didn't just enter this town, you inhaled it, and people got sick, constantly. Today you pop an ibuprofen and see a doctor. In the 1300s, physicians believed illness came from an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids. The doctor's first move was to drain your blood, open a vein and let it flow until you felt lightheaded. If bloodletting didn't work, leeches. The person you went to for help was often the one who made things worse. Surgery existed, but forget sterile gloves, anesthesia, monitors. A surgeon could amputate in under a minute. Speed was the only mercy. Wounds were sealed with hot oil or cauterized with red-hot iron. Bandages reused without washing. The same hands that cut open one patient moved straight to the next. Every surgery was a coin flip between survival and slow death from infection. Now the question every modern person asks. You've got 2-ply toilet paper, wet wipes, a bidet. Forget all of it. After the garderobe or the bucket, the wealthy use scraps of wool or linen. Everyone else, moss, leaves, handfuls of straw. The Romans had at least invented the sponge on a stick shared among users, but even that was long gone by the medieval period. And this is where it all connects. Today, you wash your hands with soap without thinking. Back then, unwashed hands handled food that went straight into mouths. Parasites cycled endlessly. Nearly every person in medieval England, from the blacksmith to the bishop, was carrying intestinal worms, silent passengers consuming a share of every meal, a parasitic tax on the body. Combined with dysentery and typhoid, it's no wonder the average person was lucky to see 40. But these people were not stupid. They fought back with the only tools they had, herbs and natural remedies. Honey on wounds, vinegar as disinfectant, willow bark tea for fever, which contains the same compound we now call aspirin. They didn't have the science, but through centuries of trial and error, they figured it out. Their immune systems were forged in conditions that would hospitalize a modern human within hours. They endured plagues that killed a third of Europe and came back to rebuild. They buried their children and planted crops the next morning. They lived short, hard lives and still found time to build cathedrals, compose music, and fall in love. So when we look back at medieval Europe, we shouldn't see people who failed. We should see people who survived against impossible odds. They didn't choose to live without soap or doctors or mercy. They were constrained by the hard limits of what their world could deliver. The story of why they barely reached 40 is not a story of ignorance. It's a story of a civilization locked in a relentless war against its own biology, fought without microscopes, without antibiotics, without clean water. And yet, they held the line long enough for the next generation to push forward. Cleanliness wasn't a habit, it was the ultimate luxury, and survival was the hardest thing any of them ever earned.